Okay, hi, I'm Michelle. Today I'm going to be explaining ventilation mechanics using a lung model that I created. So here's this model. It looks like this. I'll quickly just say how I created it. I found duct tape and cardboard in my house and I used it to create the airway or the straw. The lungs themselves are made out of kind of plastic material, and so is this diaphragm down here. This green thing is just kind of like a rubbery structure that I found in my house, and this is just a container that we use to fill flour. And so that's how I created it. Each kind of structure is meant to represent something in the body, and I'll quickly just say what is what. Everything is clearly not to scale, but it's a model, so it should be okay. This silver tube right here is the trachea. The two kind of branches of the silver tube that are sticking into the lungs are the primary bronchi, and those two structures are the lungs, the pink ones. You can see that the left one, I don't know if you can see, but the left one has a little indentation right there, and that is the cardiac notch, meaning that that's in our bodies actually where the heart goes, so the left lung is a little bit smaller than the right because of that. And this entire Tupperware itself, this structure, would be our chest cavity. And finally, this plastic down here is the diaphragm. And so now I'll explain how this model works and how it helps the lungs inflate and deflate. So when I grab on this diaphragm and I pull downward, you can see the lungs inflate and deflate in my model. So I'll pull inward, they'll deflate. I pull outward, they inflate. So on and so forth. And I'll quickly just explain why this works. And the reason is because when I pull downward, I'm actually increasing the volume inside the chest cavity, inside this bottle. Because pulling downward, now there's extra space. When I pull upward, there's less space inside the bottle because the plastic is inside. So what ends up happening is we know that according to Boyle's law, that when you increase the volume in a container, you end up decreasing the pressure in the container. So when I increase the volume here in my Tupperware, I'm actually decreasing the pressure of air inside the Tupperware. We also know that air flows from a high pressure to low pressure. So if I've decreased the pressure inside this container, it means it's going to be lower than the air pressure outside the container. And therefore, since air flows from high pressure to low pressure, air is going to flow into my Tupperware, into my container. And similarly, when I push back in, the volume of the container is smaller, so the pressure of air is more. And when pressure is high in here, inside the container, but it is low outside, air is going to flow from the container outside. And since this is pretty airtight, I've taped it, and there's a rubber band here. The only way that air can flow out of this container is through my airway, through the straw, and that's what's connected to the lungs. So that is exactly how, when I increase the volume of this container, you can see the lungs inflate, and when I decrease, they deflate. Also, this model pretty closely resembles what goes on inside our bodies. When we breathe or when we inhale, what's actually happening is our diaphragm is contracting, so it's being pushed downwards. And in our bodies, the diaphragm is connected very closely with the chest cavity. So when the diaphragm contracts, when that's pushed downward, the chest cavity is also pushed downward. And therefore, that whole region, the volume is increased there. And so that is kind of shown in this model, that when the diaphragm contracts, the volume inside the chest cavity is increased. And inside our bodies, that's the same thing. So when the pressure there decreases, air in the atmosphere is going to be at a higher pressure than air inside our lungs, and therefore we inhale. We take in air from outside, and it kind of reaches that equilibrium in terms of pressure, so that the pressure inside the lungs is not lower than the atmospheric pressure anymore. But what ends up happening is we exhale as well, so the diaphragm is pushed back inwards. And since the volume would therefore be decreased inside our chest cavity, inside our lungs, that the pressure inside there would be higher than the pressure outside. And so we exhale in order to make the air pressures back at equilibrium, and so air leaves our lungs and it's back into the atmosphere. And that cycle continues, and that's how we ventilate. So thank you so much for watching.